Some of you are excited. You love the extra hour of sleep. And some of you didn't get an extra hour of sleep, right? How many of you did not get an extra hour of sleep? You either stayed up an hour later or just that internal clock. It's like, nope. you get 6 hours or you get 7 hours or whatever it is. And so you woke up, and some of you, your electricity went off and you had no idea what time it was anyway. I'm not excited about the extra hour, although I do like the fall back a lot better than the spring forward. My vote would be to just split the difference and just keep it the same, though, all the way around. But nevertheless, I'm excited because today is Baptism Sunday, and super, super excited about that. We've got 3 that are scheduled to be baptized today and celebrating what God has done in their life, what God is doing in their lives, and what God is going to do in the days, weeks, and months to come. And super excited to be able to share that with you today. But I'm also excited because we are starting a new series called Doubting God. And doubting God is something that I think all of us have experienced. No matter who you are, no matter if you've grown up in the church, no matter if maybe this is your first Sunday either in person or you're listening online, and you know, what's this all about? We all have God doubts. And just because we're in the church, just because we are people of faith, doesn't eliminate us from having doubts from time to time. So what do we do with those doubts? Are there answers for those doubts? Beginning today, I want to take the next 3 weeks after today to look at 4 of the most, in my mind, 4 of the most common doubts relating to God, and why many people struggle in their relationship with God and having a relationship with God, trusting God moving forward. And regardless of where you are currently in faith, I believe that these 4 weeks can be super helpful to you, and trust that they will do so. But as I have looked at doubt, there are 3 keys in my mind to wrestling with doubt, and I've simply titled it on the screen, P's Keys. Some people call me P. Lenny, short for Pastor Len, or I don't know if it's necessarily short for it, but it was a title that Joel Monti actually passed on to me many years ago when I was serving as youth pastor. And some have just shortened it, and they just dropped the Lenny part, and they just call me P. I'm not sure about that at times, but just the same. P's Keys. So let's walk through this. There's 3 of them. Remember that doubt can be destructive or constructive. Doubt doesn't have to be destructive. Sadly, we find ourselves in a time, especially in American history, where the deconstructive movement is huge. Deconstruction is all over the place. You hear about it left and right, about those that are in the church leaving the church because something has come up. There's these God doubts, and they haven't wrestled with them in a healthy way, and it becomes destructive to their faith, and they just give up. And they walk away, and they throw it all away and say, I just don't believe. I'm not a believer anymore. Or they might say, I'm kind of in the middle. I have some beliefs, but basically they still end up walking away. And we see this, even some of the more famous Christian music artists and different ones that have deconstructed their faith. They came to a roadblock. They came to something in their life. Maybe it was this understanding, this thought that God is good, but they've experienced bad in their life. And so if God is good, how can he be bad? We'll look at addressing that in our 4th week, because it's a huge thing, but some people, they won't really wrestle through with it, and they just come to that, and it's like their faith is built on a house of cards, and you pull that card and it all crumbles down. And what do they do? And there's other things. My teacher taught me that evolution, and so That seems to be the way. And so the Bible doesn't seem to be accurate. We can't trust it. We'll look at that in week 3. All kinds of things that people come up against and go, well, can I trust this? Can I believe that? Well, I'm having doubts. And remember, doubts can be destructive or constructive. Our doubts can actually build our faith. Doubts don't have to be something that we shy away from. Doubts don't have to be something that we're afraid of. Doubts can be something that, if we'll embrace them properly, can actually be used to build our faith, not destroy it. And that's what this series is about. Second key to wrestling with doubts, don't be dismissive or disingenuous. Dismissive, I would label in 2 different categories. There are those that are passive dismissive. Like they have a doubt and they don't really want to wrestle with it. Like, I might not be looked at as a Christian. Like, I don't want to, I can't handle the thought of having a doubt. That makes me feel bad, and so I'm just going to dismiss this doubt. And when they're dismissing it, they're actually losing an opportunity to grow in their faith. Something that could be a great building block, not a stumbling stone that they're afraid of, but a building block that God could use in their life to actually strengthen their faith. But because they're afraid of going deeper, they just dismiss that doubt. The thing is, if you don't deal with the doubt, then sometime down the road that doubt comes back, and oftentimes doubts that aren't dealt with grow. And so don't be dismissive. You got passive dismissive, but then there's also aggressive dismissive. And they're not just so much dismissing doubts, but they're dismissing any kind of arguments that might go into fighting against that doubt. And so they're not really searching for truth. They're against things, right? And we see those that aren't really interested in learning truth. They've already got their mind made up. And so the doubt that they have about God isn't just really a fair question of trying to get like, why is this? They're dismissive of any answers that might actually help them be pointed in God's direction to truth. But we've got dismissive, then we also have disingenuous. And there are those that when they encounter doubts, they're disingenuous in their going after truth. They act like they want to learn, but they don't really want to learn. They act like they're open to what they might find, but they're not really open. They're disingenuous. They're faking it. So the third key, if we want to grow through our doubts, if we want to be able to actually strengthen our faith, what do we need to do? We need to choose to be candid and courageous. We need to be candid with our doubts. This is something I'm wrestling with. This is something I'm dealing with. This is something that is a roadblock for me right now. We've got to be candid about that. We've got to be candid in our approach to finding answers to our doubts. Not just faking our way through it. So as we go through the next 4 weeks, we're going to go after it. We're going to get really candid. Here's why we have some of these doubts. Here's why they exist. But we're also candid about here's really what we can see. There are some things that help us clearly to see past these doubts that we have. But we've got to be candid about both the doubt and the answers to those doubts. And we've got to be courageous, again, with the doubt. Because if we're not candid and courageous, it will kill, it will destroy, will have self-destruction to our faith. So we're going to choose to be candid and courageous because pretense kills spiritual life. So candid and courageous because pretense kills spiritual life. Here's the first question we're going to deal with in our series. Does God really exist? Does God really exist? Because if we can't answer this question, if we're stuck on this question, this doubt, then the rest of the doubts aren't going to matter anyway, right? And this is the foundational piece. And this is oftentimes the one that people will wrestle with before Christ, but sometimes even after we're saved and we have a salvation experience, and we would claim that, maybe even be baptized like three will today, and like, yes, I believe God exists. I'm confident that God exists. And we've got this walk with Him, like, you ask me how I know He lives, and we have that reply like the song used to say that we would sing. You ask me how I know He lives within my heart. Like, I know. But then life happens. Like, I'm not so sure anymore. I used to be sure. But now I'm not so sure anymore. Now I'm wrestling because I thought this, or I felt this, and now I'm not really sure about what I thought, and now I'm not feeling what I used to feel. And so even people that have been in the church for many years ask the question, does God really exist? And sometimes that question scares them, and so they don't really go after the answer. They just kind of fake it till they make it, they hope. But we're going to go after it because it's foundational to moving forward in our faith. Does God really exist? Psalm 19 is where we're going to head. Psalm 19. If you don't have a Bible, grab a KWC Bible. It's page 390 if you're grabbing a KWC Bible. Most of the scripture that I'll be sharing today I'll have right up on the screens so that you can read it. But I just think it's important for you to be able to access it on your own, whether you brought a Bible in, you've got a smartphone and you got access either to a Bible app, or you just find the Bible online, or a tablet, or like I said, grab a KWC Bible and turn to page 390. Either way, whatever the case, Psalm 19 is where we'll begin. King David, shepherd boy David and Goliath. David is the one writing this. David wrote many of the Psalms. And if you didn't have a kid, you brought your own Bible in and you're not sure where to turn, where Psalms is, just like open it to the middle. If you got the whole thing, Genesis to Revelation, if you open it to the middle, you're going to be pretty close. Okay, Psalm 19. David wrote this. David writes some amazing things throughout the books, throughout the book of Psalms. And he writes this, beginning with chapter 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. And so if we want an answer, here's a declaration, David says. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. Verse 3, they have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Maybe go ahead and just close your eyes and picture a sunrise. Like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. A couple years ago, I was wrestling with some doubts, some God doubts. Not so much wrestling with doubting His existence, but questioning whether or not maybe He was in control, whether or not I would be okay, my family would be okay. And it was out for one of my morning walks. And some of you have heard this before, but it's so marking that it's a part of my story and will be for the rest of my life. As I walked up River Street and got to M46 and looked east to check for traffic before I started across 46, and I had been praying about God's provision and protection and all of that, and kind of just wrestling with some doubts. And I looked to the east and I saw one of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen. And it's if that moment God's like, you know what? I've been doing this for a while. Like, I got you. I got you. Relax. You'll be all right. You know, I know all about things. And just this peace, this overwhelming peace. I didn't know how things were going to change or what was going to happen or any of that, but I knew God was in control. Because I saw the sun coming out of its chamber, right? Like, boom, I'm here. We see in Hebrews chapter 11, it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So I was given faith in that moment. When I saw the sunrise, my faith was sparked. Something that I couldn't see was sparked by what I could see. Somebody has basically come up with the faith is trusting or believing in what we can't see because of what we can see. And that surely was ignited in me on that beautiful sunrise morning. But as Oswald Chambers said, doubt is not always a sign that a man is wrong. It may be a sign that he is thinking. So we can have faith, but there are times when we'll have our doubts as well. And the doubts don't mean that it's a sign that a man is wrong. It may be a sign that he is thinking. Because every day we exercise faith. Every day there's something that we're going to exercise faith in, right? Like today, you exercise faith. You believed that your car would start. Now, some of you had more faith than others because some of you've had some experiences. Maybe you've had some trouble recently with your car not starting. But most of us, we woke up and we believed that our car would start this morning. We'd be able to drive in. You exercised faith. You sat down on a chair. You believed that chair would do what? Hold you up and not fold, right? You exercised faith, whether you were thinking of it or not. When you eat your food this afternoon, you're exercising faith that whoever prepared that food did not poison that food. Some of you are not sure about lunch now. You're like... But every day we exercise faith in something or someone, right? But there are times when we start to question our faith in God and in His even existence. But we can trust in what we can't see because of what we can see. Our faith is based on reasoning, facts, and prior experience, just like starting a car, sitting in a seat, or eating a meal. And God set it up that way. There's structure, there's logic, there's reason that goes into things through science and etc. Merely looking at God's creation, David has pointed out, can point to the existence of God. He says the heavens declare the glory of God. They're telling us that God is real. So some of you have come either with questions today or, as we look at this series, basically 3 different categories, okay? Either you're wrestling with this doubt yourself in the moment, you know somebody else that has or will, and I trust that what we discuss today and in the coming weeks will be helpful to you in helping walk that individual or individuals through their season of doubt. Or maybe right now you're not going through a season of doubt, but at some point in the future you encounter a season of doubt, and today's arguments, today's case will help bring you back to and help strengthen your faith. When it comes to the existence of God, there are historically 3 arguments that are used. The first argument is the cosmological argument. And I'm going to use a couple big words, three answers here, three different reasonings, three different logics or arguments. Two of them are a little bigger words, and they're not words that I use every day. I promise you that. And I will use these words because these are traditionally the titles of the arguments that are used, but I will give you some very basic definitions to work with, to understand, and then we'll also probably use some examples to help illustrate it a little bit further. But first of all, we see the cosmological argument, which is the existence of stuff. It really goes to cause and effect. Because we see something, we understand that there's a cause behind it. Because the universe exists, there must have been something that caused it. That's why scientists came up with the Big Bang Theory. Now, I would argue that their conclusion is incorrect, but why they went after that is different. It's actually, I mean, it's the same. It's like there's an effect. We see this. There had to be something that caused this. And so let's give an answer to that. And so they've done what they could to come up with an answer. We'll talk about why I believe that answer falls short as we look at the second argument. But we look at cause and effect, and if we look at cause and effect, you follow, oftentimes there's a chain of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. But logic tells us that there's got to be some point where there's an end to that chain, where there was something that caused it, or someone, we should say, that caused the effect to begin with. Somebody outside, someone outside, a greater being outside of the chain of events that set it all in motion. Logic to me seems to point that would be God, right? I'm wearing a watch. How did this watch get here? I put it on. The mystery is solved. This watch tells time. Do you know what? This watch will also tell my heart rate. How about that? Which is, wait for it, 83 14 minutes ago. It's now 73. So it's gone down a little bit. Some of you, your heart rate would be a lot more, it'd be elevated. Like 14 minutes ago, it was one thing. Like, if you're standing in my place, oh, my heart rate's... How does my watch tell time and be able to give my heart rate? That's an effect because somebody designed it, right? To do those things. Cosmological argument says that there's a cause, there's an effect, there's a chain of events that took place. David looked at creation and knew that it had to have a creator. Cause and effect, the existence of stuff. The second argument builds onto that. Not only is there the existence of stuff, but we can see that there's a design or there's a purpose to stuff. And we see David applying this logic in Psalm 19 when he talks about the sun. It says it has a rhythm. It rises and it what? It sets, it falls. It rises and it sets. It's like day after day, right? There's this rhythm. There's this routine, there's this design, there's this purpose to give light in the day, and then there's dark at night, because we all have understood that it's easier to sleep when it's dark, right? Those that work a midnight shift, a third shift, it's crazy, it's not natural, right? Because you're working when everybody else is sleeping, when we're made to sleep because the lights are out. You're working, and then you're trying to sleep when there's daylight. And that is so hard to do. David not only points to the rhythm of the sun, he points to something very specific that the sun does. Did you catch it? What does it do? It gives us warmth. It gives us heat. And scientists they've done a lot of research, and they come to this conclusion. And some have even called it the Goldilocks zone. That the sun is in the exact right location in relation to the earth that it needs to be. Farther away, we would all be peepsicles. We'd be frozen, right? Any closer, and we'd be peeps kebabs. It'd be too hot for us. But it's just right. It's not too far, and it's not too close. So we don't get too cold or too hot. It's just right. Now, some of you may argue about that just a little bit with winter in Michigan coming up. And so, no, I think Florida right now is just right. Or Arizona is just right. But you get the idea. Let me press in on this a little bit more. Let me tell you about this right here. Do you have a microphone? I think not. This is my time. This has brown liquid that millions and millions years ago started forming on the surface of a rock. And as it started forming and piling up, this wonderful metal it came out of the water and wrapped it. And then a little while longer, it created this little perforated spot on the top to make it easier to access such brown liquid. And then there became this little piece right here that you can pull up and access this brown liquid that somebody designed. Or actually, it wasn't designed. It just came out of nowhere. It just formed. But it may be bad for you, but boy, it sure tastes good. And on that can, the metal, just paint came out of nowhere and attached itself to the can in this wonderful design with red, white, and blue. And these letters they just magically appeared. How many of you believe that? Some of you believe, I do think it tastes good. You had that part, right? It's no, obviously there was a lot of thought that went into this, right? There was some planning into the liquid and research and development and figuring stuff out and putting things together into a substance that would be enjoyed by millions of people around the world. And into a container that would keep it fresh for a certain amount of time. Even though it does have an expiration date. It's a use by, drink by. And a way to access that liquid in a fairly easy way. We'd say, well, whoever came up with that, they were pretty smart in the whole process. Not bad. Whoever's giving me a hard time about my eating habits, drinking habits. By the way, I purchased these things yesterday at a grocery store in Carroll, and the register, the cashier is like, Pepsi and bananas. That's an interesting combination. And I was too busy trying to figure out the keypad to say anything about it being a sermon illustration or whatever, but I have in my hand something else. Check this out. interesting shape. Oh, by the way, this fits right in the hand. Did you notice that? I mean, perfect. But do you know what? This fits in the hand rather nicely. Look at that. And it's color coded. If it's green, let it go. If it's yellow, open it up. Chow down. If it's brown, banana bread. But check this out. Interesting little tab on the top here. Oh man, look how easy that is to open and access. And the shape is like made to just go, like it's like built to go right in. And unlike this, it's biodegradable. I mean, how cool is that? You know, David pointed to the galaxies and said, here's proof of the existence of God. I think you can look at the tropical jungles and say, here's evidence of a creator. There's a divine design in this. Every banana is unique. But they all have the basic qualities, right, of a banana. And in that we see a design filled with nutrients that are made to sustain people. Give vitamins, help to people. Things that point to a divine creator. Not just that it exists, but there's a design, there's purpose behind that. It's a question, how easy would it be to convince you that this happened by chance? The Pepsi can, did this happen by chance? A banana, did this happen by chance? I don't think so. It points to the existence of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. Check out Romans chapter 1, verse 20. It says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. We can believe in who we can't see because of what we can see. Essentially, that's the cosmological argument and the teleological argument combined. One more argument that's been around for a long time, a very, very long time, that points to the existence of God is the moral argument. The moral argument. Over the last couple weeks, I've been watching pieces from a court case. Some of you are maybe familiar with Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland school shooting. I don't know if anybody else has been watching the case or not. But 17 people lost their lives. And I think around the world there's this collective, that's not right. No matter who we are, there's this feeling of that's not right. And as you listen to testimony after testimony, particularly after the case had already been decided, the jury had already given their verdict, and then they let the family members speak, and you hear from them the anguish that they have gone through the last couple of years, and watching or listening to family members die, and probably some people, when you hear that this murderer is just going to spend the rest of his life in prison, that he doesn't actually get the death penalty, there's some people that are left going, that's not right. And whatever you think on the court case or whatever, we all have an opinion on what's right and what's wrong. That's the moral argument. that something within us says that's not right. Something within us says the right thing to do is. Now, how many of us always live up to that? There's this sense of falling even beneath what we know as to be right and wrong. C.S. Lewis stated in his book, Mere Christianity, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust?" Anthropologists, those that study civilization, they tell us that no matter where you go, everybody has some kind of an idea of what's right and what's wrong. Where did that come from? Our Creator, God. That's what Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 2. He uses the moral argument. He says this, "Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences, also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them." Something God-given, this idea of right and wrong. Now, there are times when our idea of what is right and wrong gets off kilter and needs some direction, needs help, right? And that's why, as we go back to this question of does God really exist, and we go back to Psalm 19, is if you continue reading through Psalm 19, not only does David begin with the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, he gets into the moral argument and talking about what's right and wrong, talks about being a sinner and needing forgiveness. This moral argument, like there's this understanding, but there's also what many would point to as the greatest argument for knowing that God does really exist, and that's the personal argument. As you get to the end of Psalm 19, David is talking about God as his Redeemer. He's talking about God's forgiveness. He's talking about how God gives direction. That this God that created the heavens and the earth isn't just a distant God, a non-involved God, but he's a present God. He's an involved, he's a caring, providing God. We see that in his creation and how he created things that are made for our sustaining and our fulfillment. But we see that even more so, especially in his forgiveness and in his grace. And David points to that. And he concludes Psalm 19 by saying, "May the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." And this idea, this forgiveness of sin, this idea of knowing God. And so as we finish up our first week of this series, Doubting God, my prayer is that your faith has been built, has been encouraged, has been strengthened, that there are things, because there are times when the personal part of that we can struggle with. Maybe we don't feel, we don't think sometimes that God really forgives, or Satan comes along like, well, that was just your imagination, though the feelings that you had and all of this that took place, that was just your imagination, and you were held captive to the moment. It was a camp service, and the preacher did a really good job of pulling on your heartstrings and creating an atmosphere that led you to make a decision, but God doesn't even really exist. And you start questioning, you start doubting. But maybe the personal part of that isn't there at the time, but you can go back and lean on the other thing. Well, there's no way I can deny his existence. Look at what he's created. There has to be a divine designer behind that. And that can build your faith and come back to trusting in him. In the end, my goal is not that you would just believe that there's a God. In the end, my goal is that you would know God, that you would walk with him, that he would be your living hope. And as Paul comes to lead us in a closing song before baptism, that's what that's about, our living hope. That there's a God above that loves us so much. He not only created an earth that sustains us, a sun that comes up day after day and gives warmth to us, bananas that grow on trees that we can eat. He sent his son to die on a tree so that we can live forever. So it's an opportunity to worship him for who he is, and it's an opportunity to worship him for what he's done. And I'd invite you to stand as we do so, if you're able, and to worship him in spirit and in truth.